The mountain wind carried the scent of pine and coming snow through the streets of Timber Ridge, Montana. December had painted the town in shades of white and gray, transforming the rough frontier settlement into something almost peaceful. Almost. But peace, Lieutenant Commander Elena Garrett had learned, was always temporary, always fragile, always one heartbeat away from shattering into violence. She sat in her rental truck outside the Ironside Tavern, hands gripping the steering wheel with a pressure that made her knuckles white. 72 hours ago, she had been 8,000 miles away, crouched on a rooftop in Yemen, watching through a scope as the world ended in fire and screaming. 72 hours ago, she had hesitated for zero point 0.4 seconds. A fraction of time so small it seemed meaningless. But in that fraction, Sergeant Mike Brennan had died. The mathematics of failure played on an endless loop in her mind. Wind speed 8 miles per hour, southeast. Temperature 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity 62%. Bullet drop at 800 yards, 2.1 inches. She had calculated everything, everything except the one variable that mattered, her own fear, her own need for the perfect shot instead of the necessary one. Mike's last words echoed in her memory, transmitted through her earpiece in the instant before the IED turned the street below into hell. "Elle, don't wait for perfect conditions. Take The explosion had cut him off, had cut him apart, had sent the best spotter, the best friend, the best man she had ever known into the dark. Elle closed her eyes, opened them. The discipline that had carried her through Bud/S Hell Week, through 3 combat deployments, through the selection process for DEBGER, the unit that didn't officially exist, reasserted itself. She was here for a mission, not a combat mission, a mission of honor. Mike's personal effects sat in a sealed envelope on the passenger seat, his dog tags, his final letter, his last requests. And she would deliver them to Sheriff Roy Brennan, Mike's uncle, the man who had raised him after his parents died in a car crash 26 years ago. She stepped out into the cold. The Ironside Tavern stood before her, a low-slung building of dark wood and stone that had probably been serving drinks to miners and loggers for a century. Warm light glowed through frosted windows. The sound of laughter and conversation drifted out, muffled and distant. Normal people doing normal things, living normal lives. A universe away from the world Elle inhabited. She wore civilian clothes, gray hoodie, worn jeans, hiking boots scuffed from use. Her dark hair pulled back in a simple, functional ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry except for the tactical watch on her left wrist, though she had covered the tan line with a long sleeve. She looked unremarkable, forgettable. That was the point. Anonymity was armor. Silence was camouflage. In a world that rewarded loud confidence and self-promotion, she had learned that true professionals operated in the shadows, unseen and unheard until the moment action became necessary. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. The tavern's interior was exactly what she expected. Dark wood everywhere, a long bar running the length of the left wall, tables scattered across a floor of scarred planks, pool table in the back, a jukebox playing something country and melancholic, the smell of beer and grease and old smoke embedded in the walls. 20, maybe 25 people occupied the space. Most were men. Most were older. Veterans, probably. She could see it in the way they held themselves. The careful posture, the watchful eyes, the unspoken language of men who had seen things they would never fully discuss. But there were younger ones, too, early 20s, listening with rapt attention to a man holding court at the bar. Marcus Webb. Elle identified him immediately, though she had never met him. She had heard about him. Small towns talked. And Mike had mentioned him once, years ago, with a mixture of pity and disgust. Uncle Roy's got this guy in town who tells war stories at the bar every Friday. Stolen valor case. Everyone knows it, but nobody calls him on it because he's loud and mean and people don't want the confrontation. But one day someone will, and it won't be pretty. Marcus was 45 but looked older. Too much beer, too many lies. His face had the red, puffy quality of a man who lived on alcohol and anger. He wore a field jacket covered in patches, unit insignia, deployment markers, rank tabs that told a story of military service. A story that, Elle knew from Mike's brief mention, was almost entirely fiction. She moved to a corner table, back to the wall, eyes on the entrance. Old habits, SERE, training habits, survival, evasion, resistance, escape. The course that taught you how to stay alive when everything went wrong. When you were alone in enemy territory. When nobody was coming to save you. She sat down, pulled off her hoodie to reveal a plain gray t-shirt underneath, and ordered water from the bartender who approached. The bartender was older, 60 maybe, graying hair, kind eyes. Name tag read Dwight. He looked at her with curiosity but no recognition. Just water, miss? Please. Food? No, thank you. He nodded and walked away. Elle scanned the room systematically. Exits, front door, rear door near the kitchen, window behind the pool table large enough for egress if necessary. Cover, heavy oak bar, thick support columns, tables solid enough to stop most handgun rounds. Concealment, plenty of shadow, plenty of crowd. Weapons, pool cues, heavy glass ashtrays, bottles, chairs. Her mind cataloged it all without conscious effort. It was simply how she existed now. Always assessing, always preparing, always ready. In the far corner booth, a man sat alone. Older, late 60s, salt and pepper hair cut military short, strong jaw, weather-worn face that spoke of decades under the sun and wind. He wore a sheriff's uniform, the badge catching the light. Sheriff Roy Brennan. Elle recognized him from the photos Mike had shown her. The resemblance was there. Same eyes, same set to the mouth, same quiet strength that didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He was watching her. Not obviously, but Elle could feel the weight of his attention, could see the way his gaze lingered on her hands, on her posture, on the small details that most people missed, but that men like him, men who had served in Force Recon during the Cold War, who had seen combat in Desert Storm and Mogadishu, who had spent a lifetime learning to read people as a matter of survival, would notice immediately. Dwight returned with her water. Elle thanked him and took a slow sip. The glass was heavy, solid, good weight, good balance. If it came to it, the thick base would make an effective bludgeon. She hated that her mind went there automatically, hated that she couldn't look at a simple glass of water without calculating its tactical value. But that was what DevGru training did to you. It rewired your brain, turned you into a weapon system that never fully powered down. Hey, sweetheart. The voice cut through the ambient noise. Loud, aggressive, performative. Elle didn't turn, didn't react, just traced the water ring her glass had left on the table. A slow, meditative circle. I'm talking to you. Marcus Webb had noticed her. Of course he had. She was a woman, alone, quiet. The perfect target for a man who built his identity on dominating any space he occupied. This is a place for people who've actually served, Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the room. Not for tourists playing dress-up. Why don't you run along before you get hurt? The crowd laughed. Not genuine laughter. The nervous, sycophantic sound of people who went along to get along, who enabled bullies because it was easier than confronting them. Elle had heard that laugh before. In every unit that tolerated toxic leadership, in every community that looked the other way while predators operated. It was the sound of moral cowardice dressed up as social cohesion. Elle took another sip of water. Her face remained placid, a lake undisturbed by wind. Her breathing stayed even, her heart rate unchanged. Threat assessment complete. Marcus Webb, 45 years old, approximately 220 pounds, soft around the middle, hands uncalloused, no visible scars, body language aggressive but untrained. Probability of actual combat experience, less than 5%. Motivation, overcompensation for perceived inadequacy. Threat level, negligible. Sheriff Brennan shifted in his booth. Elle saw it peripherally, saw him start to stand, then hesitate. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. She gave the smallest shake of her head. "I'm fine. Stand down." He settled back, but his posture changed. Coiled, ready. "Look, sweetheart," Marcus said, louder now, emboldened by the lack of response. "This is a place for people who've actually signed on the dotted line, who've actually put their life on the line for people like you to sit here and disrespect the uniform. You see that jacket you're wearing? That surplus store knockoff? It's an insult to everyone here who actually served." The irony was a mountain so vast he couldn't see it. He spoke of disrespect while bathing in it. He spoke of service while lying about it. He spoke of sacrifice while demanding praise for sacrifices he never made. Elle finished tracing the water ring, lifted her glass, took another sip. The silence of her response was louder than any words could be. It was a professional silence. The silence of someone who had nothing to prove because her record spoke for itself. The silence of someone who understood that engaging with fools only validated their foolishness. But Marcus didn't understand silence. Men like him never did. They mistook it for weakness, for fear, for surrender. He stood from the bar, took 3 steps toward her table. "You gonna say something? Or you too stuck up to talk to real veterans?" Dwight moved from behind the bar. "Marcus, leave her alone. She's not bothering anyone." "Stay out of this, Dwight. I'm just educating the civilians about respect." Dwight had served in the Navy, Kosovo, 1999. Elle could see it in his bearing, in the way he carried himself. He recognized something in her too, though he couldn't place it. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Marcus reached her table, stood over it, invaded her space with the casual entitlement of a man who had never faced real consequences. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Elle looked up, met his eyes. Her gaze was cold, blue, calm, absolutely empty of fear or anger or any emotion he could exploit. She was simply observing him, cataloging him, the same way she would observe a malfunctioning piece of equipment or an unexpected weather pattern. A problem to be noted, and if necessary, solved. Marcus misread it completely, saw what he wanted to see. "Yeah, that's what I thought. Dead eyes, no fire. You know what your problem is? No presence, no command. I spent time in the sandbox. I know what a real soldier looks like. They got a look in their eye, a fire. You? You got nothing, just a blank stare." He leaned in closer. Elle could smell the beer on his breath, could see the broken capillaries in his nose, could calculate the exact pressure point in his wrist that would make him drop if she needed to control him. But she didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. "I can spot a faker from a mile away," Marcus continued, playing to his audience now. "Real operators? They got pride. They got bearing. You? You look like you've given up on life. Probably got that jacket at Goodwill to score free drinks on Veterans Day." The younger men at the bar laughed again, harder this time, encouraged. Elle saw Dwight's hands tighten on the bar towel he was holding, saw Sheriff Brennan's jaw clench, saw the older veterans looking away, ashamed but silent. Elle set her glass down with precise, controlled movement. Her hands remained visible, calm, steady, the hands of a surgeon or a sniper, hands that had taken lives and saved lives and carried the weight of both. Marcus leaned in even closer. "Run along, little girl. Before you get—" The door exploded open. Not opened. Exploded. The heavy oak slab slammed against the interior wall with a violence that shook the pictures hanging on the walls. The cheerful bell above it jangled discordantly. A sound of warning transformed into alarm. Three men stood silhouetted in the doorway. They wore black. Ski masks obscured their faces. And in their hands, catching the light from the bar, were firearms. A sawed-off shotgun, two pistols. "Everybody down!" The voice belonged to the man with the shotgun. Deep, controlled. The voice of someone who had done this before. "Phones and wallets on the tables, now! Nobody moves, nobody dies." The effect was instantaneous and total. The laughter died. The music from the jukebox continued, absurdly cheerful against the sudden terror. People dropped to the floor, screamed, fumbled for their belongings. Marcus Webb's face transformed. The color drained from it in a single second, leaving behind a waxy, pale mask. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. His hands, which had been gesturing so confidently moments before, began to shake. His entire body betrayed him. The bravado, the aggression, the performative masculinity, all of it evaporated like morning mist under the sun of genuine danger. Elle's world changed frequency. Sound stretched, elongated. The panicked shouts of the crowd became a low, resonant hum. The clatter of a dropped glass became a drawn-out note. Time itself seemed to compress and expand simultaneously, the way it always did when her training took over. When the civilian Elle Garrett stepped back and the DevGru operator emerged, her mind became a crystal-clear lens, observing, processing, calculating. 3 targets. Priority assessment initiated. Target 1, Ray Donovan. Age approximately 41. 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. Sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun, double barrel. Effective range 40 feet. Spread pattern, calm voice, deliberate movements. Primary threat. Distance 15 feet from Elle's position. Target 2, Tony Vega. Age approximately 34, 5'11", 190, Glock 19, 9mm. Standard capacity 15 rounds plus 1 chambered. Aggressive posture, moving through crowd collecting valuables. Poor trigger discipline, finger on trigger instead of guard. Secondary threat, distance 18 feet and mobile. Target 3, Blake Murphy. Age approximately 25, 5'9", 160. Smith & Wesson .38 special revolver, snub nose. Capacity 5 rounds. Visibly nervous, hand trembling. Least experienced, exploitable weakness. Distance 9 feet and approaching. Environmental assets cataloged. Oak table, 48 inches diameter, 80 pounds. Heavy glass ashtray, 2 pounds. Pool cue, 19 ounces, 58 inches. Chair, solid wood, 12 pounds. Distance to nearest cover, 8 feet. Distance to nearest exit, 23 feet. Probability tree initiated. Wait for Murphy to close distance. Optimal engagement range, 3 feet. Use table as weapon. Exploit nervous energy. Compress threat triangle. Success probability, 76%. Acceptable collateral risk, less than 10%. Decision made. Across the room, Sheriff Brennan watched Elle with growing recognition. He saw what others missed, saw the micro adjustments in her posture, the subtle weight shift to the balls of her feet, the way her left hand rested on the edge of the table, fingers positioned for explosive leverage, the way her right hand stayed near the heavy ashtray, both hands in launch positions. Ready. He knew that look, had seen it in force recon operators before missions, in the quiet moments before controlled violence. This woman wasn't panicking, wasn't freezing. She was a coiled spring, a weapon system running through target acquisition protocols. And in that moment, Roy Brennan understood exactly who she was. Jesus Christ, he thought. She's not a victim, she's an operator. Blake Murphy moved through the crowd, collecting phones and wallets, dropping them into a canvas bag. His hands shook so badly that he fumbled half of what he tried to grab. The revolver in his other hand wavered, the barrel tracing erratic patterns through the air. He was terrified, out of his depth, a kid playing at crime with no understanding of the consequences. He reached the young couple at the table next to Elle's. They pushed their belongings toward him, hands up, crying. He grabbed the items, shoved them in the bag. Then he turned, saw Elle, saw a small woman sitting alone, an easy target, the last collection before moving to the next section. "You too," he said, his voice cracking with adrenaline. He took a step toward her table. "Wallet and phone, now." Elle remained perfectly still, waiting, calculating. Murphy took another step, 6 feet, then another, 4 feet. His revolver pointed at her, but his eyes were unfocused, panicked, not trained, not ready. One more step, 3 feet. Elle's internal countdown hit 0. Now! Her left hand snapped to the table's edge, her right hand to the heavy glass ashtray. In a single, explosive motion, she flipped the 80-pound oak table upward, not as a shield, as a weapon, as a battering ram. The heavy edge of the table caught Blake Murphy in both kneecaps with the full force of Elle's core strength behind it. The sound was sickening, a wet crack that cut through the chaos. Patella fractures, bilateral. Murphy's legs simply ceased to function. He dropped with a scream, his revolver clattering across the floor. Elle was already moving, flowing around the falling table like water around stone. No wasted motion, every movement economical, precise, the product of 10,000 hours of training distilled into pure muscle memory. Tony Vega spun toward the commotion, Glock rising, but Elle's right arm was already in motion. The heavy glass ashtray launched from her hand with the accuracy of a major league pitcher. 2 pounds of solid glass traveling at 40 miles per hour. It connected with Vega's right temple with a sound like a hammer striking a watermelon. His eyes rolled back immediately. Lights out, brain rattled. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings, the Glock falling from nerveless fingers. Total elapsed time, 2.3 seconds. Ray Donovan's training kicked in. He swung the shotgun toward the gray blur that was Elle Garrett in motion. His finger tightened on the trigger, but Elle had already closed the 15 feet between them, had already moved inside the shotgun's effective arc. The weapon discharged. The boom was deafening in the enclosed space. Buckshot obliterated a section of the wall where Elle had been standing 0.4 seconds earlier, where she was not standing now. Her left hand clamped down on the shotgun barrel, forcing it upward toward the ceiling. Her right hand, freed from the ashtray, formed a perfect palm heel. The strike came from her entire body. Legs, core, shoulders, arm, hand, all aligned in a single kinetic chain that transferred maximum force into minimum space. The palm heel connected with Donovan's jaw. Not a punch, a calculated impact designed to rattle the brain inside the skull without causing permanent damage. Textbook SEAL close-quarters combat technique. Textbook DevGru non-lethal incapacitation. Donovan's jaw fractured. His brain bounced inside his skull. His fingers spasmed on the shotgun's trigger. The second barrel discharged, this time pointed at the ceiling. Plaster exploded. Splinters of wood rained down. The chandelier swung wildly. Elle's follow-through was immediate. Right knee to solar plexus. Donovan's diaphragm spasmed. Air evacuated his lungs. He doubled over, mouth open in a soundless gasp. Elle twisted the shotgun barrel, breaking his weakened grip, and the weapon transferred to her hands. She stepped back, broke open the shotgun. 1 live shell and 2 spent shells ejected, clattering to the floor. She kicked Tony Vega's Glock under the bar, out of play. Kicked Blake Murphy's revolver toward Dwight, who caught it automatically. Then she scanned the room. 360 sweep. 3 threats neutralized. 0 additional hostiles identified. Civilians secure. Mission complete. She returned to a neutral stance. feet shoulder-width apart, hands visible, shotgun broken open and clearly safe. Breathing controlled, heart rate elevated but manageable. Total elapsed time from first movement to final threat neutralization, 4.8 seconds. The room fell into absolute silence. Even Blake Murphy's screaming had stopped, reduced to whimpering gasps. The jukebox continued playing. The song seemed to come from another universe. A universe where violence was theoretical, where danger was something that happened to other people. Sheriff Roy Brennan stood slowly. His hands were visible, non-threatening, but his eyes were locked on Elle with an intensity that could melt steel. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority despite its quiet tone, "I need you to slowly put down the shotgun." Elle complied immediately, placed the broken weapon on the bar, stepped back, hands at her sides, visible, open. "Everyone stay calm," Brennan continued, addressing the room. "I'm Sheriff Roy Brennan. Deputies are on the way. Nobody leaves until we sort this out." He moved toward Elle, each step deliberate, careful. He stopped 6 feet from her, close enough to talk, far enough to react if needed. "I'm going to ask you some questions. I need honest answers." "Yes, sir." The sir told him volumes. Military courtesy, automatic, ingrained. "That table flip," Brennan said, "that's not self-defense class. That's CQC, environmental exploitation. Where'd you learn that?" Elle's face remained neutral. "I can't discuss my training, sir." The palm heel strike to the jaw. "That's a specific technique. Non-lethal incapacitation. DevGru teaches that variation. So does Force Recon. Which one are you?" Silence. "Your stance right now," Brennan continued, "center axis relock, ready position. Your scan pattern after neutralizing the threats. Threat priority assessment protocol. You're not civilian. You're not even regular military." Elle said nothing, but her eyes, those cold blue eyes, held his without flinching. Brennan reached slowly into his pocket, pulled out his phone, pulled up a photo, turned the screen toward her. The image showed 2 people in desert camouflage, full combat gear, rifles, the harsh sun of the Middle East washing out the colors. A man and a woman. The man had his arm around the woman's shoulders. Both were smiling, dusty, exhausted, alive. "My nephew Mike sent me this 3 years ago," Brennan said quietly. Said, "Uncle Roy, meet the best operator I've ever worked with. She's going to change the Navy." "That's you, isn't it? You're Elle Garrett." Elle's composure cracked. Just for a moment, just for a fraction of a second. But it was there. The grief, the guilt, the weight of 72 hours of not sleeping because sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant watching Mike die over and over again. "Sir," she said, her voice tight, "I came to bring you Mike's effects. I was going to call first, but I needed to do this in person." She reached into her jacket, moved slowly, pulled out a sealed envelope, handed it to Brennan. He took it with hands that had started to shake, opened it. Inside, dog tags on a chain, a letter in Mike's handwriting, a photograph of a little girl, maybe 4 years old, smiling at the camera. Brennan unfolded the letter, read silently. His jaw tightened. His eyes grew wet. When he finished, he looked up at Elle. "He wrote this?" His voice was rough, barely controlled. "Yes, sir, before the mission, standard protocol for high-risk operations." "Read it to me, I can't." "Just read it." Elle took the letter. Her hands were steady, but her voice carried the weight of sorrow. "Uncle Roy, if Elle's reading this to you, I didn't make it home. Don't blame her. She's the reason I lasted as long as I did. She's the best operator I've ever known, the best friend. Tell her she's the best of us. Tell her to keep fighting. Tell Emma I love her." She paused, swallowed. "Tell her Daddy was proud to serve alongside heroes, especially the quiet ones." Mike. Roy Brennan stood at attention, 68 years old, decorated Marine, Force Recon veteran, sheriff for 31 years, and he wept, openly, unashamed, for the nephew he had raised, for the boy who had become a man, for the warrior who had died doing what warriors do. Elle stood at attention beside him, tears streaming down her face, silent, rigid, holding the grief inside the way she had been trained, the way she always did. The sound of sirens grew in the distance, growing closer, the real world reasserting itself. But for this moment, in this small Montana tavern, two warriors mourned together, bonded by loss, by service, by the unspoken understanding that only those who have walked through fire can share. And in the corner, collapsed on the floor in a pool of his own vomit and urine, Marcus Webb stared at the woman he had mocked. The woman who had just saved his worthless life. The woman who was everything he had pretended to be. The woman who was a United States Navy SEAL. Part 2. The silence that followed Sheriff Brennan's words was profound, sacred almost. The kind of silence that forms around truth too heavy for casual conversation. Around revelations that reshape understanding. United States Navy SEAL. The words hung in the air like smoke, visible, undeniable, transforming everything they touched. The patrons who had been huddled under tables and behind the bar slowly emerged. Their eyes moved from the three incapacitated robbers to Elle, from the shattered ceiling to the overturned table, to the woman standing at attention beside the sheriff, tears tracking silently down her face. The cognitive dissonance was total. This small woman in civilian clothes, this quiet person who had sat alone, saying nothing, accepting insults without response. She had just done something their minds struggled to process. Dwight, the bartender, stood behind the bar with Blake Murphy's revolver still in his hand. He had served in the Navy, Kosovo. He knew sailors, knew the culture, knew the difference between support personnel and operators. But a female SEAL? DevGru? The math didn't compute with anything his generation had been raised to understand. Yet the evidence was irrefutable. The three men on the floor were proof, written in violence and precision. "Commander," Dwight said quietly. His voice carried respect that bordered on reverence. "Thank you." Elle nodded, said nothing. Her attention was on Sheriff Brennan, who had wiped his eyes and was carefully folding Mike's letter, replacing it in the envelope with the dog tags and photograph. "How did it happen?" Brennan asked. His voice was steady now, professional. "The grief locked away behind discipline, the way soldiers do, the way they must." "Yemen," Elle said. "Hostage rescue, 8 operators inserted. Target building was rigged. Mike was on point when the IED triggered. He was covering the team's extraction, saved 6 lives, including mine." "You were his overwatch?" "Yes, sir. Rooftop position, 800 meters. I should have seen the trigger man. Should have taken the shot before Mike reached the doorway. I hesitated. 0.4 seconds. That's all it took." Brennan looked at her for a long moment, saw the guilt etched into every line of her face, recognized it. He had carried the same weight for 40 years. For the men who died in Mogadishu while he lived. For the Marines who didn't come home from Desert Storm. Survivor's guilt was the tax that warriors paid for breathing when brothers didn't. 0.4 seconds, he repeated. In combat, under fire, with a target moving through a hot zone. He shook his head. "Commander, I've been where you are. I know what you're thinking. But hesitation didn't kill Mike. The enemy did. Mike knew the risks. We all do." "Sir, with respect, that's an order, Commander. You will not blame yourself for Mike's death. You will honor it by continuing the mission. Understood?" Elle's throat worked. "Yes, sir." The sound of sirens had grown from distant wails to immediate presence. Red and blue lights strobed through the tavern's windows. Car doors slammed. Boots on pavement. The cavalry arriving after the battle was already won. Brennan turned to face the room. His voice carried command authority that made everyone stand straighter. Listen up. 3 county deputies are about to come through that door. You will cooperate fully. You will give truthful statements. Nobody embellishes. Nobody lies. We clear? Murmurs of assent rippled through the crowd. The door opened. 3 deputies entered, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the dim interior. They saw the scene, saw the sheriff, saw the 3 men on the floor. The lead deputy, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and competent bearing, assessed the situation in seconds. "Sheriff, you good?" "I'm good, Martinez. We've got 3 perpetrators, armed robbery, one with bilateral knee fractures, one with head trauma, one with jaw fracture. All need medical before booking." Deputy Martinez looked at the destruction, the overturned table, the shattered ceiling, the unconscious men. "Who took them down?" Brennan gestured to Elle. "She did, all 3. Self-defense in defense of others." Martinez's eyebrows rose. "All 3? By herself?" "That's correct." "Jesus, okay. I'll call for ambulances and get statements." She keyed her radio, began coordinating. Within minutes, the tavern filled with first responders. Paramedics worked on the 3 robbers. Blake Murphy screamed as they stabilized his shattered knees. Tony Vega remained unconscious, strapped to a backboard with a cervical collar, vital signs monitored. Ray Donovan sat against the wall, hands zip-tied behind his back, jaw swollen to twice its normal size, breathing through his nose in shallow, painful gasps. More deputies arrived, began taking statements from witnesses. The stories they heard were consistent, repetitive, the same narrative told 20 different ways. 3 armed men burst in, demanded valuables. A woman sitting alone took all 3 down in less than 5 seconds, moved like nothing they had ever seen, like a ghost, like smoke with bones, like violence personified. Deputy Martinez approached Elle, who stood beside Sheriff Brennan, watching the organized chaos with the detached calm of someone who had seen much worse. "Ma'am, I need your statement. Can we talk?" "Of course." They moved to a quiet corner. Martinez pulled out a notepad. "Let's start with basics. Name?" "Lieutenant Commander Elena Garrett, United States Navy." Martinez wrote that down, paused, looked up. "Navy? What brings you to Timber Ridge?" "Personal business. Delivering effects of a fallen service member to next of kin." "That would be Sheriff Brennan?" "Yes, ma'am." "Okay, walk me through what happened." Elle recounted the events with military precision, factual, unemotional, times, distances, threat assessments, actions taken, outcomes achieved. She spoke the way she would deliver an after-action report, clean, professional, leaving nothing out but adding no flourishes. Martinez wrote steadily. When Elle finished, the deputy looked up. "Ma'am, I have to ask, what's your MOS, your military specialty?" "Special operations." "Like special forces? SEALs?" Elle said nothing, just met Martinez's eyes with that same calm, neutral gaze. Martinez understood. "Right, can't confirm or deny. Got it." She closed her notebook. "For what it's worth, ma'am, you saved a lot of lives tonight, including my uncle's. He's the guy in the red flannel shirt. Thank you. Just did what needed doing." "Yeah, well, most people freeze. You did the opposite." Martinez hesitated. "My brother's Army, Ranger Battalion. He talks about people like you. Says there's operators and then there's operators. Capital letters. I think I just met one." Elle didn't respond. Didn't need to. While statements were being taken, while paramedics loaded the 3 robbers into ambulances under armed guard, while deputies photographed evidence and collected weapons, Marcus Webb sat alone at the bar. He had vomited twice, had pissed himself. The stain on his jeans was visible and humiliating. His hands shook so badly he couldn't hold a glass of water Dwight had offered him. Everything he had built, every story, every performance, every moment of borrowed glory, it had all collapsed in the span of 5 seconds. Revealed for the facade it was, by a woman who actually embodied everything he pretended to be. The younger men who had laughed at his jokes, who had bought him drinks, who had hung on his every word about Fallujah and Baghdad and all the places he had never been, they wouldn't look at him now. The contempt was palpable, the shame crushing. Sheriff Brennan approached, stood beside Marcus, didn't sit, didn't touch him, just stood there, a pillar of disappointed authority. Marcus, Sheriff, the word came out broken, wet. I've known about your lies for 15 years. Ran your DD-214 the first month I took office. Marcus closed his eyes. Then why didn't you? Because I hoped you'd figure it out yourself, that you'd grow up, stop needing to be something you're not. Brennan's voice was hard, unforgiving. But you didn't. You got worse, more elaborate, more committed to the fiction. And tonight, when actual danger walked through that door, you showed everyone exactly who you really are. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't cut it, Marcus. You dishonored every person in this room who actually served. You made yourself the center of attention with lies, while real warriors like Commander Garrett sit in corners hoping not to be noticed because they don't need the validation. They don't need the applause. They just do the job. Marcus looked up, saw Elle across the room, giving her statement to Deputy Martinez, saw the quiet dignity, the complete absence of ego. She had just done something extraordinary, and she was treating it like a minor inconvenience, like it was simply what anyone would have done, even though everyone in the room knew that wasn't true, knew that what she had done required years of training, thousands of hours of practice, and a mindset that most human beings would never possess. What do I do? Marcus asked. How do I fix this? You start by telling the truth, publicly. Tomorrow, you call everyone you've ever lied to. You admit what you are and what you aren't. And then you find a way to actually serve, to actually contribute, to actually earn a fraction of the respect you've been stealing. They'll hate me. They already do. They just didn't have permission to show it until tonight. Brennan turned to leave, then paused. Mike used to tell me about stolen valor cases, said the worst part wasn't the lying, it was the waste. All that energy spent on a fiction instead of finding a real purpose. You've wasted 20 years, Marcus. How many more are you going to waste? He walked away, leaving Marcus alone with the wreckage of his identity. 40 minutes after the robbery began, the FBI arrived. Special Agent Catherine Pierce was 45 years old, former Marine, military police. She had the bearing of someone who had spent a career dealing with military criminals, with jurisdiction disputes, with the messy intersection of federal law and military justice. She wore a dark suit and sensible shoes and carried herself with absolute authority. She walked directly to Elle. Lieutenant Commander Garrett? Elle turned. Yes, ma'am. Special Agent Catherine Pierce, FBI. Can we talk privately? They stepped outside into the cold Montana night. The air was crystalline, clean, the kind of cold that clarified thought. Ma'am, Pierce began, Ray Donovan has federal warrants, armed robbery, RICO connections. He's been hitting small towns across 3 states. We've been tracking him for 8 months. Understood. Your statement to the deputies was thorough, but I need to ask some questions that they didn't. About your training, about your unit. Agent Pierce, my unit affiliation is classified. I can't discuss operational details. I'm not asking you to compromise security. I'm asking because, Pierce paused, chose her words carefully. I knew Mike Brennan. We served together at Camp Lejeune. He was a good man. And he talked about you. Told me there was a female operator at DevGru who was the best shooter he'd ever seen. Said you could put rounds through a keyhole at 1,000 meters. Said you were going to break every barrier and set every record and make history whether the Navy wanted you to or not. Elle's throat tightened. Mike had a tendency to exaggerate. No, ma'am, he really didn't. Pierce met her eyes. I'm sorry for your loss. I know Yemen was classified. I know I'm not supposed to know about it, but I do. And I know Mike died saving his team. Just like I know you're here because you blame yourself. Just like I know that nothing I say will make that better." They stood in silence for a moment. Two women who had chosen paths that few women walked, who understood the cost. "The takedown tonight," Pierce said, "that was textbook. Better than textbook. That was art. You neutralized 3 armed suspects in under 5 seconds with 0 friendly casualties. Do you understand how remarkable that is? I did what I was trained to do. Commander, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen hundreds of violent encounters. I've never seen anything like what you did. Never." Pierce pulled out a business card. "You need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. Character witness. Legal support. Someone to talk to who gets it. Whatever you need." Elle took the card. "Thank you, ma'am. One more thing. The media is going to hear about this. Small town, female Navy SEAL, dramatic rescue. It's going to be a story. You prepared for that?" "No, ma'am, but I'll handle it. I'll do what I can to keep your name out of official reports, but cell phone footage is already on social media. This is going to spread." Elle nodded. She had expected as much. Privacy was a luxury that evaporated the moment violence entered the public sphere. Pierce left. Elle stood alone in the parking lot, watching her breath form clouds in the freezing air. Through the tavern windows, she could see the organized chaos continuing. Witnesses still giving statements. Crime scene techs photographing evidence. The machinery of justice grinding forward. She felt exhausted. Not physically. She could run another 10 miles if needed. Could execute another mission. But emotionally, the toll was accumulating. 72 hours without real sleep. The weight of Mike's death. The violence tonight. The exposure. All of it pressing down like a physical force. "Commander," she turned. Sheriff Brennan stood in the doorway. "Sir, I need to show you something, in my truck." They walked to his official vehicle, a Ford F-250 with county sheriff markings. Brennan opened the passenger door, pulled out a wooden box from under the seat. The box was old, scarred, the kind of box that had traveled through decades. He opened it. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, military photos spanning generations. "This is my father," Brennan said, pointing to a black and white image of a young Marine in World War II uniform. Iwo Jima, Purple Heart, Bronze Star. He died in 1987. Never talked about the war. Not once. He pointed to another photo. "This is me, Force Recon, Lebanon, 1983. We lost 241 Marines in the barracks bombing. I was on patrol. Survived because I wasn't there." Another photo. Desert Storm, 1991. The Highway of Death. You've heard of it? "Yes, sir. I helped create it. We destroyed retreating Iraqi forces. Thousands of vehicles. God knows how many people. It was a slaughter. Legal. Justified. Necessary. But a slaughter nonetheless." His voice was distant, remembering. "I carried that for years. Thought I was a monster. Until an older Marine told me something that changed everything." "What did he say?" "He said, 'Son, you didn't enjoy it. You didn't celebrate it. You did what had to be done, and you carried the weight. That's what separates warriors from murderers. Warriors carry the weight." Brennan looked at her. "You're carrying Mike's death like it's your fault. Like hesitating for half a second makes you responsible for an IED planted by the enemy. But that's not how this works, Commander. You know that." Elle said nothing. The logic was sound, but grief wasn't logical. Brennan pulled out one more photo, recent. Mike in SEAL team gear, standing with Sheriff Brennan, both smiling, Mike's arm around his uncle's shoulders. "He wrote me a letter too," Brennan said, "separate from the one you delivered. Sent it 6 months ago." He pulled an envelope from the box. "Read it." Elle took the envelope. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a single page, Mike's handwriting, dated 6 months prior. "Uncle Roy," she read aloud, "if you're reading this without me there to tell you myself, it means the worst happened. And it means Elle probably blames herself. She'll dissect every decision, every fraction of a second, looking for the moment she failed me. But here's the truth. She never failed me, not once. She's the reason I survived as long as I did. The reason I became the operator I became. The reason I had confidence to attempt missions that others wouldn't. Because I knew she had my back. I knew that if anyone could make the impossible shot, could see the threat I missed, could pull me out of hell itself, it was Elle Garrett. So if she's there with you, drowning in guilt, tell her this. I died doing exactly what I wanted to do, working with exactly who I wanted to work with, in service of something bigger than myself. Tell her that's not tragedy, that's completion. Tell her to stop wasting energy on guilt and start using it to become the leader the next generation needs. Tell her I'm proud to have served beside her. Tell her to keep fighting, and tell her this is important. Tell her that she's allowed to be human, allowed to grieve, allowed to struggle. The Navy will try to make her into a robot, into a weapon system without feelings. Don't let them. Make sure she stays human. That's your mission, Uncle Roy. Keep Elle Garrett human. I'm counting on you. Semper Fi, Mike. Elle finished reading, folded the letter carefully, returned it to the envelope. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. He always knew what to say. He got that from his mother, my sister. She died when he was 12, cancer. He learned early that life is short and words matter, that you say the important things while you can. Brennan took the letter back. So I'm saying this while I can. You're going to be okay, Commander. It doesn't feel that way right now, but you will be, and I'm going to help make sure of it. They stood in silence for a moment, the cold Montana night wrapped around them. Stars burned overhead in a sky so clear it seemed infinite. Warriors carry the weight, Brennan said quietly, but they don't carry it alone. Mike gave me a mission, to watch out for you, to make sure you stay human. I don't fail missions, Commander. Neither do you. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to come by my office tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. We're going to talk about Mike, about grief, about legacy, about how to carry this weight without letting it crush you. And you're going to let me help. That's not a request. That's an order from a man who loved Mike as much as you did. Understood? Yes, sir. Good. Now let's get back inside. We've got work to do. They returned to the tavern. The scene had calmed considerably. Most witnesses had given statements and been released. The robbers were en route to the hospital under guard. Crime scene processing was nearly complete. Dwight approached Elle with a towel and a bottle of water. Figured you might want to clean up. Elle looked down. Her hands had blood on them. Not hers. Donovan's probably, from the jaw strike. She took the towel, cleaned her hands methodically. Thank you. No, ma'am, thank you. Dwight gestured to the bar. That's my nephew over there, the kid in the Broncos jersey. He's 22. Just got back from Afghanistan last month. He was under that table when things went down. You saved his life. Elle looked at the young man, saw the familiar signs, the hypervigilance, the startled response to loud noises, the way he positioned himself with his back to the wall. PTSD, fresh, untreated. He's Army? Marine Corps, Rifleman, Helmand Province. Tell him there's resources, VA, veteran centers, support groups. He doesn't have to white-knuckle it alone. Dwight's eyes grew wet. I will, thank you. As the night wore on, as the last deputies finished their work and the last civilians departed, the tavern emptied until only a handful remained. Dwight, Sheriff Brennan, Elle, and Marcus Webb, still sitting at the bar, still covered in the evidence of his cowardice. Brennan approached him one final time. Marcus, go home. Clean yourself up. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., you're going to come to my office. We're going to have a conversation about next steps, about consequences, about redemption, if you're willing to do the work. You understand? Marcus nodded, couldn't speak, just nodded. He stood on shaking legs, walked toward the door, paused beside Elle, opened his mouth, closed it. What could he say? What words existed that would bridge the chasm between what he had pretended to be and what she actually was? I'm sorry, he finally managed. Pathetic, inadequate, but the only words he had. Elle looked at him, really looked at him, saw not an enemy, not a threat, just a broken man drowning in the consequences of his own lies. You want to apologize? She said quietly. Then stop lying. Stop stealing valor from people who earned it. Find a way to actually serve, to actually contribute. That's how you apologize. Marcus nodded again, left without another word. Dwight began cleaning up, righting furniture, sweeping broken glass. Sheriff Brennan helped, moving chairs, clearing tables. Elle joined them, working in silence. The physical labor was meditative, restorative. When the tavern was restored to something approaching order, Dwight locked the door, turned off most of the lights. The three of them sat at the bar. Dwight poured coffee, strong, black. They drank without speaking. Finally, Dwight broke the silence. Commander, I don't know the right way to say this, but what you did tonight, that's going to become a story. A legend. People are going to talk about it for years. Elle shook her head. I'd prefer they didn't. I know, but they will anyway. And I want to do something, to commemorate it, to make sure the lesson doesn't get lost. What lesson? That the quiet ones are the dangerous ones. That the people talking the loudest are usually the weakest. That real strength doesn't need to announce itself. He stood, walked to the back room, returned with a piece of the shattered table edge, the section that had struck Blake Murphy's knees. I want to mount this on the wall, with a plaque, something simple. Dwight, that's really not necessary. It is, ma'am. This town needed this lesson. We all did. We let Marcus perform his act for 15 years because it was easier than confronting him. We enabled a fraud. But you, he held up the wood, you showed us what real looks like, and we need to remember that. Brennan spoke up. He's right, Commander. This is bigger than one night. This is about changing the culture, about creating a space where real veterans feel honored and frauds feel unwelcome, about teaching the next generation what integrity looks like. Elle considered this. Part of her hated the attention, hated the idea of being memorialized, but another part understood that symbols mattered, that stories shape culture, that sometimes the greatest service was allowing yourself to be an example, even when you didn't want to be. Okay, she said finally, but keep it simple. No hero worship, just a reminder. Dwight smiled. I know exactly what to write. They finished their coffee, prepared to leave. Elle walked toward the door, then paused, turned back to look at the tavern, at the corner table where she had sat in silence while Marcus performed, at the space where three armed men had thought they could terrorize innocent people, at the floor where she had proven once again that evil only wins when good people do nothing. Mike would have liked this place, she said quietly, would have appreciated what you're trying to build here. Then we'll build it right, Brennan replied. We'll make it a place he'd be proud of. They stepped out into the Montana night. The temperature had dropped further. Stars burned in a sky so clear it seemed infinite. Elle breathed deep, let the cold air fill her lungs, felt something shift inside her. Not healing, not yet, but the first movement toward it, the first crack in the armor of guilt. Where are you staying? Brennan asked. Motel on the edge of town. You have plans tomorrow? No, sir. Good. Come by my office, 10 a.m. We'll talk about Mike, about what comes next, about mentorship and legacy and all the things old warriors pass to young ones. I'd like that, sir. They parted ways. Elle drove to her motel in silence, showered, stood underwater so hot it turned her skin red, scrubbing away blood and cordite and the residue of violence. When she finally climbed into bed, she reached for her jacket, found the pocket. Inside was a folded piece of paper she had forgotten about. Mike had handed it to her that morning before Yemen. "Don't read this unless I don't come back," he'd said. She had shoved it in her pocket, forgotten about it in the chaos. Now in the darkness of the motel room, Elle unfolded it. Mike's handwriting, just 3 lines. "Elle, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't carry me as weight, carry me as wings. Pass it forward. M." Elle folded the paper carefully, placed it on the nightstand beside Mike's envelope. Pass it forward. For the first time in 72 hours, Elena Garrett slept. Part 3. Morning came to Timber Ridge the way it always did in December. Slow. Gray. The sun a pale disk behind clouds that promised snow. Elle woke at 05:30, her internal clock calibrated by years of military discipline. She had slept 6 hours, dreamless for the most part, the first real sleep since Yemen. She went through her morning routine with mechanical precision, physical training, 200 push-ups, 200 sit-ups, 5-mile run through the frozen streets of the mountain town. The cold air burned her lungs, cleared her head. By the time she returned to the motel, showered and dressed, the sun had climbed above the mountains, transforming the world from gray to gold. At 9:45, she drove to the county sheriff's office. The building was old brick, solid, built in an era when permanence mattered. She parked, sat in the truck for a moment, preparing herself. Not for danger, for something harder. For vulnerability, for allowing someone to see past the armor. Sheriff Brennan's office was on the 2nd floor. The door stood open. He sat behind a desk covered in paperwork, reading glasses perched on his nose, looking every bit the small-town sheriff rather than the Force Recon Marine he had been. He glanced up when Elle appeared in the doorway. "Commander, right on time. Coffee?" "Thank you, sir." He poured from an ancient percolator, handed her a mug that said, "World's okayest sheriff." She smiled despite herself, sat in the chair he indicated. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I expected." "Good, that's good." He settled into his own chair, studied her over the rim of his mug. "I've been thinking about what Mike asked me to do, about mentorship, and I think the first thing you need to understand is that this isn't about me teaching you tactics or tradecraft. You're better at that than I ever was." "Sir, I doubt that." "Don't. I've seen your record. I made some calls last night, talked to people who know people. Your reputation precedes you, Commander. Top of your BUD/S class. Honor graduate from SQT. 2 silver stars. A Navy Cross for that clusterfuck in Syria 18 months ago, where you pulled 3 wounded operators out of a building while taking fire from 3 directions. You're already a legend, and you're only 28 years old." Elle shifted uncomfortably. "Records don't tell the whole story." "No, they don't, which is why we're having this conversation." He leaned forward. "The mentorship Mike wanted me to provide isn't about making you a better operator. It's about making sure you survive being one. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, if you're inclined that way. Because the thing they don't teach you at Coronado is how to carry 30 years of this work without it crushing you." "How do you do it?" "Honestly, I didn't. Not well. After Mogadishu, I drank for 2 years, lost my marriage, nearly lost my career. It was another old Marine who grabbed me by the collar and said, 'Son, you can keep drowning in what happened, or you can honor the fallen by living well, but you can't do both.'" He paused, sipped coffee, continued. "So I got sober, got help, started talking to people who understood, and eventually I found a different mission. Became a sheriff. Started protecting people here instead of overseas. It saved my life, gave me purpose, and now I'm paying that forward by telling you the same thing that Marine told me. You've got 2 choices, drown in Mike's death or honor him by living well? What's it going to be? Elle looked down at her coffee, at the liquid surface reflecting fluorescent lights. I don't know how to honor him. Everything I do, every mission, it all feels hollow without him there. That feeling doesn't go away. Not completely, but it changes, transforms. You learn to carry the fallen with you differently, not as weight that drags you down, but as witness. They're watching, cheering you on, wanting you to succeed. Mike doesn't want you to suffer. He wants you to thrive. His note said to carry him as wings, to pass it forward. Exactly. And that's what we're going to figure out together. How to turn grief into legacy. How to transform loss into purpose. How to keep Mike alive by becoming the leader he knew you could be. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes. Outside, the normal sounds of a sheriff's office filtered through the door. Radio chatter, ringing phones, deputies coordinating patrols, the machinery of small-town law enforcement. What happened last night, Brennan said eventually, that's going to have consequences, good and bad. The media is already calling. National news picked up the story. Female Navy SEAL stops armed robbery. They want interviews, want photos, want you to be their feel-good story. I'm not doing interviews. I know. I've been deflecting since 6 a.m., but they're persistent, and some of them are already in town. Elle closed her eyes, exhaled slowly. I just want to deliver Mike's effects and disappear. I understand, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. And maybe, just maybe, that's not what should happen. She opened her eyes. Sir, something changed in this town last night. Something important. Marcus Webb's lie got exposed. Real veterans saw what actual competence looks like. Young people saw that quiet professionalism beats loud arrogance. That's valuable. That's a lesson worth reinforcing. By turning me into a symbol, by allowing yourself to be an example, there's a difference. Before Elle could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Deputy Martinez stuck her head in. Sheriff, sorry to interrupt. There's someone here to see Commander Garrett. Says it's important. Who? Corporal Delaney Ashford, Navy, says she was in the tavern last night. Brennan looked at Elle. Your call, Commander. Elle nodded. Send her in. The young woman who entered was 22 years old, petite, maybe 5'4", dark hair in a regulation bun. She wore her Navy working uniform with pride, though Elle noticed the aviation rating badge. Mechanic, not combat arms. The woman's hands twisted nervously as she stood at attention. Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're busy, but I had to talk to you before you left town. At ease, Corporal. Have a seat. Delaney sat on the edge of the chair like she might need to flee at any moment. Elle recognized the posture, had worn it herself once, years ago, when approaching authority figures who held her future in their hands. What can I do for you? Ma'am, I was in the bathroom when the robbery started. Heard everything. When I came out, I saw what you did, and I've been thinking about it all night. Because for the last 2 years, I've been trying to figure out if something was possible. If a dream I had was realistic or just stupid. And watching you last night, I think I got my answer. What dream? Delaney took a deep breath. I want to be a SEAL, ma'am. I know it's crazy. I'm a mechanic. I work on helicopter engines. But I'm fast, and I'm strong, and I won't quit. And I thought, maybe if I could talk to you, get your advice, understand what it really takes, maybe I'd know if I should try or if I'm wasting my time. Elle studied the young woman, saw the determination, saw the fear underneath, saw herself at 22 standing in front of a BUD/S instructor, asking the same question in a different form. Why do you want this? My brother, Timothy Ashford. He was SEAL Team 3, Afghanistan, 2021. He died covering his platoon's extraction. Got shot pulling 4 guys to safety. He was my hero, ma'am. My whole life, he was the person I wanted to be like. And when he died, I thought the best way to honor him was to follow his path, to become what he was. You'll never be him. The words were harsh, intentional. Elle watched Delaney's reaction, saw the flinch, the hurt, but also the steel underneath, the refusal to be deterred. I know that, ma'am. I'm not trying to replace him. I'm trying to honor him, to prove that his sacrifice meant something, that it inspired something good. Bud/S will try to break you. The instructors will target you. They'll push harder because you're female. They'll look for any excuse to wring you out. Your classmates might resent you, might sabotage you. The culture doesn't change just because the rules do. You understand that? Yes, ma'am. You'll be cold, wet, exhausted, in pain, constantly, for months. And even if you make it through, even if you graduate, you'll spend years proving yourself over and over. Every mission, every operation, you'll never get the benefit of the doubt. You'll always be the woman's SEAL first and the operator second. Are you prepared for that? I think so, ma'am. Thinking isn't good enough. You need to know. You need to be certain. Because if you quit, if you ring the bell, you'll validate every person who said women don't belong in the teams. You'll make it harder for the next woman, for the woman after that. That's not fair. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. Can you carry that weight? Delaney's jaw set. Her eyes hardened. Yes, ma'am, I can. Elle stood, walked to the window, looked out at the mountains, at the vast expanse of wilderness surrounding this small town. She thought about Bud/S, about Hell Week, about the moment she had wanted to quit, when her body screamed for rest, and her mind whispered that proving a point wasn't worth the suffering. She thought about the instructor who had pulled her aside and said, "You can quit if you want. Nobody will blame you. Or you can keep going and change everything. Your choice." She had kept going. She turned back to Delaney. "I'm going to tell you what someone once told me, and I need you to really hear it. Don't argue with the doubters. Don't make speeches about equality or capability. Don't explain yourself or defend your right to be there. Just show up. Do the work. Be so competent they can't ignore you. Let your performance be the only argument you make." Delaney nodded, absorbing every word. When you get to Bud/S, if you get there, you're going to want to prove you're as good as the men. That's the wrong goal. Your goal is to prove you meet the standard, period. Not the female standard, not some adjusted metric. The standard, the same standard that's been used for 70 years. You meet that, you earn the trident. Simple. Yes, ma'am. Elle pulled out her phone, typed rapidly. "I'm sending you my email. Every week you're going to send me your PST scores. Push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, run time, swim time. I'm going to tell you if you're ready or if you need more work. And I'm not going to go easy on you because you're a woman. I'm going to be harder on you because the enemy won't care about your gender. The ocean during Hell Week won't care. The instructors won't care. So I won't either. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't done anything. Thank me when you graduate, if you graduate." Sheriff Brennan, who had been silent throughout the exchange, spoke up. "Corporal Ashford, I knew your brother. Good man, good SEAL. He'd be proud of what you're trying to do." Delaney's eyes grew wet. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." "If you're serious about this," Brennan continued, "I still have contacts at Coronado. I can make a call, get you a meeting with the right people. But understand, that meeting won't make it easier. It'll just get your application seen. The rest is on you." "I understand, sir. I appreciate any help." "Then we'll talk. Come by next week. We'll see what we can do." Delaney stood, came to attention. "Ma'am, sir, thank you for your time." After she left, Brennan looked at Elle with something like approval. "That was good, what you told her. Honest, direct, no false encouragement, but no discouragement either. Just reality. She needs to know what she's getting into. She does, and now she does. But you gave her something else too. Hope. Permission to try. That matters. Elle returned to her seat, sipped coffee that had gone lukewarm. Mike used to talk about legacy, about the responsibility of passing on what we know. I never really understood what he meant, thought it was just philosophical rambling. And now? Now I'm starting to see it. The way you mentored Mike, the way he mentored me, the way I just mentored Delaney. It's a chain, each generation teaching the next, each warrior preparing the ones who come after. Exactly. And that's why what happened last night matters beyond just stopping a robbery. You showed that young woman, showed everyone in that tavern what right looks like, what competence without ego looks like, what serving without seeking credit looks like. That's going to ripple forward. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, people will tell the story, and it'll inspire others. I still don't like being the center of attention. Good, because the moment you start liking it is the moment you become Marcus Webb. The moment your service becomes performance. Stay humble, Commander, but don't confuse humility with hiding. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is let others see what excellence looks like. They talk for another hour about Mike, about Force Recon and DevGru, and the differences between the Marines and the Navy, about the wars they had fought and the peace they hoped their service would secure, about grief and guilt and the long road to healing. When Elle finally stood to leave, Brennan walked her to the door. "One more thing," he said. "Mike wanted you to have this." He handed her a small box. Inside was a challenge coin, SEAL team insignia on one side, on the other engraved words, "The Quiet Professional, M.B." He had it made 6 months ago, sent it to me for safekeeping, said to give it to you if anything happened to him. Elle held the coin, feeling its weight, the cool metal against her palm. Mike's final gift, his final message. Be what you are. No apologies, no explanations, just quiet, professional excellence. Thank you, sir. 1,000 hours, first Saturday of every month. That's when the local veterans meet at the tavern. If you're in town, you're welcome. Expected even. We take care of our own, Commander. You're one of us now. Elle drove back to the motel, packed her few belongings, prepared to leave Timber Ridge and return to base, to missions, to the relentless forward motion of military life. But before she left, she made one stop. The Ironside Tavern looked different in daylight. Smaller, less dramatic. Dwight was inside, preparing for the evening crowd. He looked up when Elle entered. "Commander, didn't expect to see you again. I'm heading out, wanted to say goodbye. Glad you stopped by. I've got something to show you." He led her to the wall where just 12 hours ago, Marcus had been holding court. Now, mounted in a simple frame, was a section of the oak table, the splintered edge where it had struck Blake Murphy's knees. Below it, a brass plaque. Elle read the inscription. "Be quiet. True strength doesn't announce itself." "It's perfect," she said quietly. "That corner table where you sat, I'm not moving it, not changing it. That's permanent now. We're calling it the Silent Guardians table, reserved for any operator who comes through. Active duty, retired, doesn't matter. They sit there, they drink for free, and they're guaranteed privacy. No questions, no stories, just respect." Elle felt her throat tighten. "Dwight, you don't have to do that." "I want to. We want to. This town needed a wake-up call. You delivered it. Now we're going to build something better on the foundation you gave us. A place where real veterans feel honored, where quiet competence is celebrated, where stolen valor gets shut down immediately." "What about Marcus?" "He came by this morning, early, before I opened, left an envelope." Dwight pulled it from behind the bar. "It's addressed to you." Elle took the envelope, opened it. Inside was a single page, handwritten. "Commander Garrett, I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm done lying. Tomorrow I confess publicly at the VFW. Then I volunteer at the VA. Real service, not stolen valor. Thank you for showing me what right looks like. Marcus Webb. Elle folded the letter, returned it to the envelope, handed it back to Dwight. If he actually does it, if he follows through, tell him I said this. Redemption is possible, but only if he does the work. Only if he stays committed when it gets hard, when people hate him, when forgiveness seems impossible. Tell him the road is long, but it's worth walking. I'll tell him. Elle left the tavern, drove through Timber Ridge's small downtown, past the sheriff's office, past the church where Mike's memorial service would be held in 2 days, past the small houses with Christmas decorations and American flags, past the normal lives of normal people who would never know what warriors did to keep them safe. Her phone buzzed. A text from Delaney Ashford. Ma'am, sent you my first PST scores. I know they're not good enough yet, but I'm going to keep working. Thank you for believing in me. Elle pulled over, checked the email, looked at the scores. Push-ups, 68. Sit-ups, 82. Pull-ups, 9. Run, 10:42. Swim, 11:15. Not good enough, not yet, but not hopeless either. She typed a response. Corporal, your scores show potential, but potential means nothing without work. You need 80 push-ups minimum, 100 sit-ups, 15 pull-ups, run under 9:30, swim under 9. That's where you need to be before you even think about Bud/S. You've got work to do. Get after it. Lieutenant Commander Garrett. She hit send, pulled back onto the road. The GPS showed 14 hours to San Diego, to Coronado, to the teams, to her life. But as she drove, she found herself thinking about legacy, about Mike's final request that Sheriff Brennan mentor her, about Delaney's determination to honor her brother, about Marcus's fragile commitment to redemption, about the plaque on the wall and the reserve table and the story that would be told for years. She thought about what it meant to be a quiet professional in a world that rewarded volume, what it meant to serve without seeking credit, to excel without celebrating, to carry the weight without complaining. And she thought about the future, about the women who would come after her, who would face the same skepticism, the same barriers, the same requirement to prove themselves over and over. They would need examples, role models, proof that it was possible. Maybe that was the real mission. Not the operations overseas, not the classified work that would never be acknowledged, but this, being visible enough to inspire, excellent enough to set the standard, human enough to show that warriors could be whole. 3 months passed. Winter deepened its grip on Montana. Christmas came and went. New Year's followed. The story of the Ironside Tavern robbery spread beyond Timber Ridge, beyond Montana. National news had picked it up. The video clips went viral. Headlines screamed, "Female Navy SEAL stops armed robbery in 5 seconds. Woman warrior saves town. The silent guardian strikes." Elle ignored it all, returned to work, to missions, to the endless grind of training and deployment and training again. She didn't give interviews, didn't appear on talk shows, didn't write a book or start a podcast or monetize her moment of public heroism. She just did her job. But she kept her promise to Delaney. Every week an email arrived with updated PST scores. Every week Elle responded with feedback, corrections, encouragement when appropriate, brutal honesty when needed. And slowly, week by week, the numbers improved. By February, Delaney had transformed herself. Push-ups, 91. Sit-ups, 112. Pull-ups, 19. Run, 8:55. Swim, 9:02. Elle received a different email from Sheriff Brennan. Commander, thought you'd want to know. Marcus Webb followed through, made his public confession at the VFW, got crucified as expected. But he didn't run, stood there and took it, then started volunteering at the VA. helps veterans navigate the bureaucracy. Turns out, his supply clerk skills translate well to paperwork and benefits applications. He's actually good at it, helping guys get disability claims processed, finding resources for homeless vets, doing real service for the first time in his life. Still a long road ahead, but he's walking it. Also, Delaney Ashford applied for BUD/S. Used you as a reference. Hope that was okay. We're all proud of what you're building here. This legacy thing Mike talked about. Roy. Elle read the email 3 times. Felt something unfamiliar. Not pride exactly. Not satisfaction. Something deeper. Purpose. The sense that her actions had created ripples that extended beyond the immediate moment. That she had changed trajectories. Inspired growth. Catalyzed transformation. This was what Mike had meant. This was legacy. In March, during a rare break between deployments, Elle returned to Timber Ridge, drove up on a Friday evening. The mountains were still snow-covered, but spring was beginning to assert itself. Longer days, warmer afternoons, the promise of renewal. She arrived at the Ironside Tavern, now officially renamed the Silent Warrior, just after sunset. The parking lot was full. Inside, she could hear voices, laughter, the sound of community. Dwight saw her immediately, smiled, pointed to the corner table. It was empty, as always, reserved, waiting. Elle sat down, ordered water, looked around the room. The crowd was different than it had been 3 months ago. More diverse, more female veterans, younger faces mixed with older ones. Real conversations about real service. No performances, no stolen valor, just authentic respect and genuine camaraderie. On the wall, the plaque glowed in the warm light. Be quiet. True strength doesn't announce itself. Sheriff Brennan appeared from the crowd, older, grayer, but still strong, still carrying the weight with dignity. He sat across from her without asking permission. Welcome back, Commander. Good to be back, sir. How are you? Better. The nightmares are less frequent. The guilt is manageable. I'm learning to carry it differently. Good. That's good. He paused. Mike would be proud of you, of what you've built, of how you're handling this. I haven't built anything. You inspired a young woman to pursue her dream. You showed a fraud what redemption looks like. You gave this town a standard to aspire to. You changed culture. That's not nothing, Commander. That's everything. Before Elle could respond, the door opened. Delaney Ashford entered, in civilian clothes, looking nervous. She scanned the room, spotted Elle, and her face transformed. Relief, gratitude, determination. She approached the table. Ma'am, I got accepted. BUD/S, Class 387. I start in May. Elle stood, extended her hand. They shook. Warrior to future warrior. Congratulations, Corporal. Now the real work begins. I know, ma'am. I'm ready. You're not. Nobody is. But you will be. You've put in the work. You've earned the chance. The rest is on you. Delaney nodded, started to leave, then turned back. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Were you scared? During BUD/S? During Hell Week? Elle considered lying, considered offering the stoic, unshakable image that people expected from operators. But she remembered Mike's letter. Keep her human. Terrified, she said honestly. Every single day, scared I'd fail. Scared I'd validate every person who said I didn't belong. Scared I wasn't strong enough, fast enough, tough enough. The fear never went away. But you graduated. Because I decided fear was acceptable. Quitting wasn't. You're going to be scared, Corporal. That's guaranteed. The question is whether you let fear make your decisions or whether you make decisions despite fear. That's the only difference between people who succeed and people who quit. Delaney absorbed this, nodded slowly. Thank you, ma'am, for everything. After she left, Brennan smiled. You're a natural teacher, you know that? I'm just passing on what was given to me. That's what teaching is. They sat in comfortable silence. Around them, the tavern hummed with life, with purpose, with the kind of community that forms when people commit to something larger than themselves. Marcus Webb entered through the rear door. He had lost weight, looked healthier, cleaner. He carried a folder of paperwork, headed straight to a table where an older veteran sat alone, looking lost. Marcus sat down, opened the folder, began explaining something about VA benefits. Patient, knowledgeable, helpful. He glanced toward Elle's table, made eye contact for a brief moment, nodded once. A gesture of acknowledgement, of gratitude, of commitment to continuing the work. Elle nodded back. Dwight brought her another water, leaned in close. You see what you started here? This whole thing, the cultural change, the redemption stories, the mentorship, it all traces back to that night, to 5 seconds of action. But more importantly, to a lifetime of preparation that made those 5 seconds possible. I was just doing my job. No, ma'am, you were being who you are, and that inspired others to want to be better versions of themselves. That's leadership. That's legacy. The evening progressed. Veterans shared stories. Younger sailors asked questions of older ones. Laughter mixed with serious conversation. The atmosphere was healthy, healing, exactly what a veteran community should be. At 9 o'clock, Brennan stood, raised his coffee mug. The room quieted. I want to say something, he began. 4 months ago, 3 armed men walked through that door thinking they'd found easy prey. They were wrong. But more than that, they gave us a gift. They showed us who we really were. Most of us froze. One of us acted. Commander Garrett didn't just stop a robbery. She held up a mirror, and we didn't like what we saw. So we changed. Marcus stopped lying and started serving. Delaney started training for the impossible. This town stopped celebrating the loudest and started honoring the quietest. That's leadership, not speeches, action. Mike Brennan knew that. His legacy lives through her, and we're all better for having witnessed it. The room erupted in applause, not performative, not loud or showy, but genuine, heartfelt, the applause of warriors honoring one of their own. Elle stood, not to make a speech, just to acknowledge, to accept, to allow herself for once to be seen, to be recognized, to be the example that others needed. The applause faded, the evening continued, and Elle sat back down, feeling something she hadn't felt since Yemen. Peace, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. The knowledge that her service mattered, that her sacrifice had meaning, that the chain of mentorship and legacy would continue forward, link by link, warrior to warrior, generation to generation. 4 years later, December again, winter returning to Montana like an old friend. Elle drove through Timber Ridge, now familiar with every street, every landmark. She came here once a month when training schedules allowed, to visit Brennan, to check on Marcus's progress, to maintain connection to the place where her healing had begun. But today was special. Today was graduation day. The ceremony took place at Coronado Naval Base, 1,400 miles away. But the silent warrior was hosting a watch party, screens set up, live feed streaming. The entire veteran community gathered to witness something historic. Delaney Ashford's BUD/S graduation, Class 387. Started with 142 candidates, graduated 17. And one of those 17 was a 5'4" woman from Montana who had refused to quit despite every reason to do so. Elle sat at her usual table, Sheriff Brennan beside her. Now 73 years old, retired from law enforcement, but still the moral center of the veteran community, still the keeper of standards, still the bridge between generations. Marcus Webb stood behind the bar, helping Dwight serve drinks. 4 years sober. 4 years of authentic service. He ran 3 veteran support groups now. helped hundreds of veterans navigate benefits, had become, through sheer persistence and humility, a valued member of the community he had once disgraced. The screen showed Coronado Beach, the BUD/S compound, the bell that Delaney had refused to ring despite every impulse screaming at her to quit. The instructors who had pushed her harder than anyone, the classmates who had eventually learned to trust her, to respect her, to fight alongside her. The commanding officer stepped to the podium, began calling names. Each graduate stepped forward, received the trident pin, the symbol of SEAL qualification, the mark of earning membership in the most elite brotherhood in the American military. Petty Officer Second Class Delaney Ashford. The room in Montana erupted. Cheers, applause, whistles, pride radiating from every person present. On screen, Delaney marched forward, stopped at attention. The instructor pinned the trident to her uniform. She saluted. He returned it. She executed a perfect about-face and marched back to formation. The camera caught her face for just a moment, tears streaming, jaw set, eyes forward, the face of someone who had achieved the impossible through sheer force of will. Elle felt her own tears fall, felt Brennan's hand on her shoulder, felt the weight of legacy, of mentorship, of the chain that connected Mike to her to Delaney, Delaney to whoever would come next. After the ceremony, after the celebration, after the crowd had thinned and the screens went dark, Elle and Brennan sat alone at the corner table. Mike knew, Brennan said quietly. When he wrote those letters, when he made his plans, he knew this would happen. Knew you'd heal. Knew you'd build something. Knew you'd pass the torch forward. He saw the leader you'd become, even when you couldn't see it yourself. I miss him every day. I know, but he's here, in this place, in what you've built, in Delaney's achievement, in Marcus's redemption, in every story told, in every standard maintained. That's immortality, not living forever, but creating ripples that continue after you're gone. Elle pulled out the challenge coin Mike had given her. The quiet professional. She placed it on the table between them. That's what he wanted us to be. What he was. What I try to be. What I hope Delaney becomes. She will, because she learned from you. The same way you learned from Mike. The same way he learned from me. The same way I learned from the Marines who came before me. That's how this works. That's how excellence perpetuates. Through mentorship, through example, through warriors who care enough to invest in the next generation. They sat in silence. The weight of years and service and sacrifice and triumph settling around them like a comfortable blanket. Outside, snow began to fall, soft, silent, covering the world in white, making everything clean and new and full of possibility. Inside the silent warrior, under the glow of the plaque that read, "Be quiet, true strength doesn't announce itself," two warriors sat together, one old, one young, both carrying the weight, both passing the torch forward, both understanding that true legacy isn't measured in medals or headlines or moments of public glory. It's measured in the people you inspire, the lives you change, the standards you maintain, the torch you pass forward. 4 years ago, Elle Garrett had walked into a bar carrying grief and guilt. She had left having planted seeds she never knew she'd scattered. Now those seeds had grown into something beautiful, something enduring. Delaney would mentor others. Marcus would help hundreds more veterans. The silent warrior would stand for generations as a place where quiet professionals were honored. And Elle? She would continue doing what she had always done, the job. Without fanfare, without recognition, just the quiet, relentless excellence that changed everything.